Yeah, welcome to Coffee Compiler Clubs. It's a quiet morning. Um, Here today to talk about compilers and language runtimes and typing systems and anything else that crosses anyone's mind. Um, it's late June and it's freezing in the mountains. I don't know why. Fine. And and Ben is new. If it's all right, Ben, can you give us like 10 seconds, 20 seconds of why you're here?
Yeah, that's easy. I'm here because I'm trying to write my own parser, Lexa, compiler, transpiler, whatever it ends up being, um, for work for a whole bunch of different projects, and it's all coming together in one great big scope creeping nightmare that has driven me crazy.
There you go. Sounds good. So, can you say who you work for?
Yeah, that's not too hard. Yeah, so just work for a little software company out of Perth, Australia. Um, we deal with the compiler has nothing to do with them whatsoever.
Oh,
The day job is basically writing mining scheduling software for maintenance. So I'm in the ERP space and very far away from systems and compilers and
so
the tool
why are
chain.
you writing a compiler?
Why am I writing a compiler? I'm writing a compiler because I've spent the last decade trying, basically using tools that absolutely suck at refactoring. It's just like, if you just gave me the AST, I could give you a set of rules and you could run it for me and I'd be happy.
Okay,
Instead of me spending hours doing this mind-numbingly boring stuff. So
gotcha.
yes, um, I want to implement list-off substitutions and things like that inside of a compiler and not have to do it by hand.
Gotcha. All
Oh,
right.
across a bunch of stuff as well, like C Sharp, Java, TypeScript, JavaScript. There's lots and lots of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Welcome to the wonderful world of language design and implementation. There's a lot of reasons why things suck.
Ah, yes.
Fine. So, thank you. And then, this is an open forum, so ask or say or whatever whenever you want. I have a short, simple update. I'm trying to get external compilation functions defined, built, something, and I'm hitting things I hit before, which is I'm rolling up against what is a reasonable, I'm going to say module structure? What is a reasonable import structure? What is the bare minimum syntax I can get away with declaring a package and importing things? Um, and it's there are a lot of I'm gonna say potholes here. So my current strategy, theory, something is that when you compile a simple project, you have to declare a root, which probably starts out being current working directory of the project, and then uh, anything in any variable with the same name as a base file name will get exported. So if I'm compiling a structure called foo, then and I'm in a file foo, then it gets exported. Within any structure, any field that's not listed with a leading underscore is assumed to be exported, and underscore just means it's a private field, so don't export. Easy. And then recursively on directories, if I have an exporting file, then because it has the structure the same name, then a directory will have things that recursively could export under the same rules. So if you wanted to build a single file, oh, and main always exports at the top level. And so if you want to make one file and it just has a main in it and does something, like you're just writing a throwaway piece of code, hello world, then you just write whatever, sys.print hello world, and you're done. And if you have nothing more than one file, it's just that file and you're done. You don't have to put a package name in, you don't have to put an import in. If you want to say a couple directories of things, see, people are hitting the chat. Audio gone. Oh, Theodore's audio. Yeah, I saw you disappear. No, you wiped out. Ah, Theodore has internet fail. Um, yeah, you're not rejoined yet. Bam. Eventually. All right. So yeah, so then if you're otherwise, if you're like getting a little more structure, you put something in that more or less counts as a basic plain module at some level. Just an empty struct with the file name matching the base struct name, and then make a directory and add more things down inside the directories. Um, that's that piece of that piece. The other piece out of that is where do you get your imports from? And my current theory is you just use something with a fully qualified name, and then you can have name shortcuts come along later that just says this name is from some other name. It's a short version of some longer name. So that's how you get a long name into a short name. And then you look at the fully qualified name, and it looks as the file directories and confirms it finds things. Instead of reading the source, though, I'll go find the matching .o files. And then the .o files will have like a Java class file will have a compressed version of the symbol table of whatever is needed. Um, so I spent last week building a bidirectional IR print reader, and it seems to be pretty stable. I seem to be able to read and write IR directly, which includes all the names you would need to link against and do whole program optimization if you wanted to or whatever. But I'm still trying to figure out what's the rules on visibility for things. And that was my simple update. So having done that and lost Theodore, I think his internet must be down. Does anyone else want to share anything? Ryan, you were all excited about the differences between equality last week before.
I haven't really had anything to bring up today. There's some generic stuff you can read, but I don't know. Did you see the Wikipedia article that was linked?
From last week?
Yeah, I think so.
I do not remember. Let's see here. Let me go write a simple up. Let me go hack something for a second in the timestamps. Over here. I would have to pull it up and pull. I've read many of such things, but I'd have to pull that one up. You remember what it is? You have the link handy? Yeah, I'm reading chat from last week here. Da-da-da-da-da. It's going to be a pain in the neck. Here, maybe I can get it this way. Get this way. Go to here. Last week's announcement, last week's doc. Oh, here's Aaron. Here's the links from last week. Pick one. We had D types, carbon language, no. Modular Mojo, Ponylang, Hydrolang. Which one are you thinking about? Speegens, these are all memory management. We had lifetime and memory management last week. Equivalence must have been the week before. Hey, Aaron, did you make it in? You have no sound or you're not saying anything. All right. I'm hoping to get a conversation and not have a monologue. So somebody has to ask a question here, or we'll just have a really short meeting. Doesn't do me any good to talk to myself. No, it's all quiet. Aaron, you wanna throw out anything?
Yeah, I've been thinking about the ways in which I don't know how well this fits with this particular group. The ways in which people do structured logging.
Oh, structured logging. Okay.
So there's a lot of logs that are just like format out some string.
Right.
And that's terrible because if you do that at scale, you end up in a point where a sizable percentage of all of the CPU in your entire company
Yeah.
is going to turning integers into ISO timestamps.
Right. Plus, you have an interestingly large amount of repetition of strings getting blasted out.
Right. So I would much rather write something that looks like a row store where I just say, here is my struct.
Yeah.
And there's enough metadata in there that something that does not have a schema file can read it out.
Ah, I see.
So the
Well,
naive
that's
version of that is write a JSON object, and the slightly smarter version of that is write things that have type tags on the front of them so they
right.
can be converted to a JSON object
Right.
when you're doing it.
Yeah, I went the type tag in front when I did things that were related, but I didn't do them at the kind of scale you do. Like I had access and knowledge where all my types came from. So when you say, I just wrote a type tag, somebody has to map a type tag back to like something else.
Right. And eventually, you probably want that log to not continue living like it's a row store, but to have something go through and say, okay, I'm going to take 100,000 log lines at a time and convert them to a column store. And I've got all these timestamps that would be better
Yeah.
stored in Delta encoding.
Right.
And
Well,
I've
what the
got all of these variables that look like strings, but are actually enums. So there's never anything more
right,
than four values in them. Those should be
right,
2 bits and do
right.
nice
This is
packing.
this is this is H2O encoding. This is like what H2O did, except we ate a CSV file and then broke it up into million billion, parts. And each part has 100,000 rows. We would do columnar compression, where exactly the enums of two elements would get 2 bits and all that kind of shit.
Right. And there's sometimes things that you would like to just stick on the side as metadata.
Yeah,
So I might want to say something like, I'm enumerating all of the things that are in here, but also I've mapped all of the social security numbers that were in this column to numbers, and the dictionary to undictionary encode it. I encrypted with this key.
right.
And I want to stick a key ID in there for the dictionary to do the dictionary decoding, where now I can do cheap scans where I figure out what the keys are as I'm doing my push predicate pushdown.
Sure.
But that on when I'm coming back out, if someone just gave you the files, you would need the keys to be able to figure out
Right.
which individual social security number is being represented by five in this section.
This is data-oriented processing. And
Um, so my question is sort of, what do you do in a logging library to make all of this go sanely? And in particular, in the world of I'm writing my own programming language, what
yeah.
do you think should go into the standard library of a programming language to make things like structured logging a more reasonable default than strings?
Well, my
Because
my
most of the
first,
places I work with, you start with strings and you
yeah,
have strings for
yeah,
years until eventually you're like, oh my God, strings are
God, strings
terrible.
are
I want
terrible.
structured logging.
Yeah.
How do we fix that so people start with structured logging?
People start with strings because they're short and easy. No, no, no. So if you ask, my first gut response is if you say logging, I shoot you because I've never seen logging do anything except suck down massive cycles. And the amount of like debugging rewards that came out of logging was minuscule compared to the overheads of manage and maintenance of the actual tracking this shit. Okay, not that it was never useful. It was just, the cost benefit trade-off was usually way wrong. You could make the cost benefit trade-off better, but it was way wrong. And the way wrong
So
was,
you would say write
I
stuff to databases, don't log.
don't, no, don't, you don't record history except when you need to have state that you're going to look at later. If you have a write-only log, why did you write it? That's what I'm saying. It's just like there's a whole lot of shit that's like, okay, you have to. No, 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 you have to. So
I
so
don't
so it's
know.
a legit concern.
I had a situation when I worked at Intercontinental Exchange where we had something called Curve Engine, and this would process a very large amount of data. And so I created a SQL database that would log certain operations and uh, created like a list of all the steps. And then uh, I built two of those and then found the first point where they differed using like a script that went through the databases. Well, C++ program,
Right.
but and that was useful, and that helped us find
Right.
what had
You
broken
build
the.
a one-off debugging tool to help sort a problem. And also, like anything that deals the real world and needs a history, such as an exchange where people buy and sell. They want to record transfer of ownership.
Well, that wasn't like a log for the actual. So the curve engine is basically a pricing machine. It's not used to like log transactions.
Right.
But like what I was doing is like calculating all the or like saving all the steps of the calculations
Right.
and
Right.
trying to figure out why some of the results changed.
Right. I,
Because we
I,
had
I, I would call such a thing delta debugging, and I've done it in the past repeatedly, always with a one-off throwaway. Um, where I knew I needed to record a bunch of things, and then I did it again, something later, and I didn't understand what was changing and why, and then I took the two logs and then walked them down in parallel, or I would pull up it twice in the debugger and step them through the debugger in single
yeah.
step until
Well, the
it was
problem
different.
sometimes is like with the reason I brought up the curve engine thing is the amount of data that it processed was far too large for you to step through with a debugger, and
Um,
that's the fundamental issue that.
yeah, so I say step through the debugger, but big chunks. And there were times when I added a third tool in there that would stop both debuggers when something differed. At H2O, I was doing terabytes of data, and so I wouldn't step through with a debugger through terabytes, obviously, but I would definitely step through large chunks in two sets in parallel so I could track the differences. Having said all that, yes, you have to log. Yes, there are times when it's useful.
Well,
I just saw so many bad logging decisions made over the
so
years.
in our case, the problem was that the code would give different results when compiled on Red Hat 7 and Red Hat 8.
The-
So
uh,
you wouldn't be able to step through it two sets in the same program. You'd have to have two programs running on different machines. So that
yeah,
might
right. And
be.
they're talking back and forth over a socket. That's exactly the tool I was using. It's a socket. It says, I'm reading from you, and I'm reading from you. You two are the same. Oh, as soon as you're different, I throw a flag back at you both, and then you both halt it.
Yeah, and then what about multi-threading?
No, no, that
So
was as fast as I could go. So there were times when I had to have the wait for the transaction to go back and forth, and that slowed things down a bunch. But the common scenario for me was I was running multi-threaded two JVMs. Somebody would crash periodically, and I could detect it by the something happened way down in the code generation, but I don't know why or where. And so I would run two debuggers on the same hardware, but it was multi-threading and concurrent parallel, and not every debugging session would trigger the bug. Or sometimes it would trigger the bug where they both agreed to generate the same different code than they did last go around.
mm,
So that kind of sucked. But eventually you get one that's this one's this way, this one's that way, and oh look, now we're crashing. And why does this difference make a difference? And you have to sort it out. So I'm not saying no logging, really. I'm saying I detest logging only because I see so much bad logging. And that's
I've
exactly
certainly
what
seen
Darrick's
those
talking
delta systems useful for performance analysis, where you're like, okay, this one's
about.
faster, but does it get the same answers faster, or does it get different answers faster?
Yeah. For instance, yes, no, we did performance logging too. So to answer your question, I don't know. The thing I did with H2O that worked out well was I could record decisions about how things were compressed, but I would take a schema as a Java class object. That was my schema. And then I would assume you had a bazillion of them and figure out what compression I was going to use on a per 100,000 of them or whatever. But I had a schema. And the schema was some class variety. It was Java, so it was a Java class object. That's your schema. Now, later in life, you go change that schema. I couldn't go back and reread those logs, but I didn't either. So that was just part of how that worked. The standard thing here for H2O was I didn't actually dump the data out, so I didn't have a persistence problem. The only thing I did was I would serialize and deserialize across a cluster, which meant that the cluster lifetime was the lifetime of the serialized form, which meant we could agree as the cluster was running on how we were going to serialize, and you didn't have to deal with persistence, which is what the logging thing's about.
Right. So the serialization question is what made me think of this as a language design problem. Because I
Ah,
found that when I worked in Rust, Rust has a real culture of have a serde implementation that tells you how to serialize and deserialize all your objects. So there was sort of this standard process of, okay, I can call serde serialize, turn this thing into a JSON object, or I can call serde to serialize an object into Avero or Cbor or whatever. Choose your serialization here.
no, no, the H2O approach was definitely different. It was you gave a schema via a Java object and said, I want to serialize a bajillion of these objects. And then there was compression strategies on the columns. The recorded format was I grabbed X many rows, however many that was. It varied, wouldn't be worth it to do less than 1,000. Generally, you got profit if you did more. You wanted to break it up if you had more 100,000. You pick some counter rows. Then you did a column compression where you looked at the column, each of the columns in turn, and decided what they contained. And you throw down a tag saying, this is the strat I used for these 100,000 rows of this column. And that's all metadata that goes in your output. So when I'm talking across cluster with another cluster, when I sent him some chunk of data, it would go with a tag saying, this is how this data got compressed. And it was varied chunk by chunk by chunk, where a chunk was, like I said, 100,000 rows. The same format could have gone to disk for the same reason, and you would just have here's my serializer strategy, and he has some 20 column compression choices, and also he has space in his format to pick up new compression strats down the road, which meant that old log files could be read by new ones. So you give him a schema, and you went to the log file and said the schema aligns. Now I
But the
have,
compression strategies are kind of append only. You can add a new one, but you
yeah,
can never take away an old one
right.
because then all those log files are dead.
Yeah, that's correct. And they're not tied to the schema. They're tied to a column of similar data. So if I have things that look like Booleans, I have one compression strat. And if things that look like floats, I have a different strat. Things that look like strings, I have a different strat. And I had 20 strats at H2O. There were a bunch. Um, and when I say strategy for column or whatever, it was you looked at the data and you picked. So I looked at the column of data and I see that it has 99% zeros and every now and then it has a number. Well, maybe I go to run length encoding and the number is the same. It's a Boolean. It's all falses and occasional true. Well, then it's run length encoding with just the extra bit, not even the number it kind of varied, right? So the delta encoding, so time things, big giant numbers, all really close to each other in time. Well, or close to each other in space. Well, yeah, I pick a base value and do deltas from it. Then I have a pile of delta numbers, and those often got compressed. Same strategy run again on those because they turned out to be all U16s or something stupid. Um, yeah, but that meant that the meta description that starts was here's the schema I'm written against. And and then I have for every column and every chunk, here's my chunk breakdown. So we did it. You could fast seek through the file. So we had a list of chunks that you could binary search if you wanted to go to a particular row, and that would say you need chunk number 17 out of 2,000, and each chunk is 100,000. So you're getting 17, 1.7 million row, whatever. And here's the to go offset to go get it. Once you're at that point in the file, here is, the columns I got, and here's the compression for each one, and it's varying size. So I got, based on your column, you went to where it was going to be in the data stream, and then you would say, start from here and use the strat. And generally, most of them gave you a constant time index that the strat would describe. I recorded you at 4 bits per element, but you wanted, element number blah blah blah, and I'm at 1.7 million. Subtract your element number. Oh, you need element 999 out of this pile at 4 bits a pop. do the math, go here, pull the thing up, and or shift, shuffle, boom, there's your answer. So you would seek directly, once or twice, get the data, have an answer. And of course, it streams perfectly. Like it's all perfectly set for just data streaming if you're going to bulk do the whole file.
I guess is not surprising because a lot of the expensive log queries that are being run do smell like H2O type tasks. It's I've got 4,000 microservices that are all logging and I want to trace this one request through them. So go to all of these logs and look for things that have this request ID on it. Oh, it went through these 8 services. But to know that it went through these 8 services, I checked the request logs of thousands of services, and I want to do good data skipping that says I can look at the rainbow tables and not go into most of the files for most of the servers because there's not even a chance that this request ID is in there.
Um, yeah, your fire and forget, except you kept it in the logs, was not. H2O didn't deal with that one. I hear you, it would work, that the H2O approach for the data compression and searching and scanning would work
Right.
fine.
This is saying the relationship of the logs is similar to the relationship of the um, stock data to H2O. The logs are the thing that you would have H2O chewing.
Yes, yes. Yes, if you wanted to track one guy through all these logs, then the H2O model said I would have to do the sequential look for each one. The normal story for H2O was to say, I am simultaneously going to look up everybody through all logs all at once. And that will require me however many passes for how many steps. But the passes are really quick because they're memory bandwidth of the cluster divided by the compressed data size. And at the end, I'll tell you where all billion transactions went through and the paths they all took, and not just the one, but you could do the one and it would just be, cache miss, cache miss. Oh, it's too big. So I went to another node in the cluster. I did a seek in a file. 5 or 6 file seeks, but that's probably no better or no worse than what a database would get you for such a scale number. So what are you
Yes,
doing
I
with
feel like
the,
logs and databases have been getting a lot closer together over my career.
what are you doing with the logs? You're scanning them for bulk interesting information, or you're scanning them to know where one thing went?
So it's two. The productive thing that we're doing is trying to figure out which services actually depend on which other services by tracing requests through the whole stack.
Geez, I would have thought that would have been labeled in some dependency file somewhere. I opened a
Uh,
socket to the server over here. He opened a socket to the database roundhouse over there. He opened a socket to.
right. Every time one service makes a request to another service, you're going to have a log that says service A made a request to service B.
Oh, you don't have them recorded as this is the static layout.
So
Dynamically,
now the
the
question is, dynamically, what is the complete data flow graph between all of the services?
yeah, okay, fine.
And
Yeah,
be
that's a
like,
bulk
okay,
pass-through H2O data. Yeah, yeah. That would
here
be.
is a service that is considered low priority. Oh, wait, we have a super high priority service that makes lots of money that is dependent on a super low priority service.
Right.
That's not as low priority as we thought it was.
Yeah, well, that's classic priority inversion for you.
So a lot of this is things like detecting priority inversion.
Yeah, okay.
The
Yeah.
particular thing that the security team wants to do is find PII that's been logged and make it not be logged. And that's where the serialization game comes in being interesting because a lot of people have written serializers for their objects so that they can send them across the network so that they can do network requests.
And then,
But
yeah.
if you just take the serializer that you wrote to go do a RESTful thing and use that for logging, there's a good chance it logged sensitive information because you weren't picking the fields to log based on what you needed to log. You were picking the fields to log based on what you needed to send to make a request happen.
Yes. Well, that's the reason why you don't log everything.
So some of my
Fine.
thought is like, okay, we need this standard logging library that says, hey, when you go to log an object, first call to loggable. And
Yes,
if it has
or something.
implemented to loggable, then it will get converted into the thing you do want to log. And if it hasn't committed
Yep.
to loggable, then you can go try and coerce it with whatever serializers are around.
So the H2O thing for something similar was to use the transient keyword in your Java object. So your Java object, your schema, if you put transient, we wouldn't log it. And when you the inverse of the logger would be to inflate the Java object on the other side, and you would get the empty for the transient fields.
Yeah. So, it'd be really nice if you had a language where you could just tag a field on a struct as this is sensitive, don't log it.
There's
And if you're doing serialization in the logging context, don't.
Go has a tag feature. You can tag structs with whatever you want and then just implement your own logger that checks for that field. Tag.
Yeah.
Java has the same annotations for the same kind of things. There's some tag you want to add that says sensitive, and sensitive could be not compressed, but encode when
Yeah.
you
I mean,
log.
you pick a string that means whatever you want the string to mean. If
Right.
you see the tag URI.com company name sensitive, don't log it. Like,
I see an AI logger in near future.
Yes. Nothing sensitive there. The AI has
an
no
AI
image.
logger is going to decide which fields are sensitive or not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said phone number. No.
Yes. And you won't surely be not trained on Chinese trolls.
It can text you to ask you if you feel that your phone number is sensitive.
Good point.
No, but it really is true that it's context dependent. So at
Yep.
most of the companies I've worked, there is a class of data that is a phone number that somebody gave us so that they could find other people. I uploaded my contact list. Please find other customers of your company that have the same phone number. That's not that sensitive. Your goal was to be discoverable by that number. If you upload your phone number to do 2FA, we send you a text message with 6 digits for you to type in so you can log in. That is a much more sensitive field, even though both of those fields are phone numbers.
And in
I
fact,
have really violated your intent if I start recommending friends to you based on your two-factor login phone number in a way that I haven't if you put it on your public profile.
Surely GitHub's two-factor phone number list has never been hacked before. And will never get hacked, right? That's a good point. Here's a
Microsoft wouldn't let you down.
Yeah, right. Microsoft never has security holes. Holy shit. It
So
just
yeah,
keep
it's
pounding
really
it.
hard to get an AI to label your data sensitivity because even once I tell you it's a phone number, okay, but
Right,
under what conditions did you ask the user for that phone number?
right, right.
What I want is for someone to have a struct where they put in, I guess that's my answer to the question is what you really want as a language feature is the ability to put arbitrary string annotations on struct fields so that your logging library can then make decisions based on that. And to have as part of your standard library logging library an annotation that says don't log me, bro.
Right. So this gets to annotations
Uh,
on a language level and what's their point? It's something that somebody wants to say as a type, maybe, and somebody else can query or ask a type-like question, but it's a user-defined type. Like I
does the
never
Java
liked
standard
annotation.
library have a lot of annotations? I know there's volatile.
Right. So there's a bunch of keywords that you throw on types already. Um, Volatile, public, private package, static, final, whatever.
Yeah, but a
Um,
lot of those weren't implemented as annotations.
no. So I'm saying
Like,
that they're right. And when I look at the annotations that come out of like Java, as a implementer of the language spec, they're all meaningless. They cannot be allowed. There's no validation or verification in a typing system, so they're just whatever random garbage somebody writes. So I can't use them to do anything useful as the language processor. So you can carry them through and have somebody else do something, but as soon as somebody hacks your files, your input files, like the Java types are safe in the JVM in the sense that they get verified upon loading, and nobody who hacked a class file will get past the loader, right? You'll get something that's at least valid up to the type system from the loader. can the same be made true of annotations? Not is it or is it not? Just is it possible? So can I write a user-defined annotation type where I do some sort of type propagation with it and verify that it's at least not totally garbage? You can't just go hack a file and turn constant to non-constant and then edit the password field. Um,
I built a application framework for it was actually for building REST APIs and well, it was graph database backed framework that you could sort of compose data models and stuff. And one of the things that I built into it was that you had to declare your fields and you had to include security attributes of it. So the concept behind this was it was meant for enterprise use, and so different data could be sort of associated to different security contexts, and then that tied to like user groups and stuff. And so, but it was right there at the source level. So every field and relationship had some sort of it was like over a decade ago. I'd have to look at some of the details. I'm a bit foggy on them at this point, but um, yeah, that actually worked pretty well. I'd never thought of it for logging really because I've never been a big fan of logging in general, but it would work for that too.
But I think source level is where you want those annotations. You don't want to say write
Yeah, they
this
need to be
struct and then
required.
go
Yeah.
into a third party system and say there exists a struct with this name and this field has this sensitivity. That
Yeah.
can be really painful to store anywhere that's not the source.
Yeah. And the way that I actually now that I'm just thinking back to the system a bit, the way that I ended up doing it is that I had it was composable out of modules. So you could sort of say, okay, here's a structure item, but it had, you know, like the module sort of contact info, another module, could have a module that's employment info, another module that was like secure like password or something. And then your permissions for a user were assigned based on what modules you could see and what modules you could edit. And so then any person, like any kind of record might have a contact info, and so you could see that or not. But um yeah, and I think that would probably be pretty good for logging stuff too, because you could have, like a sensitive data module or like password module or something. It ended up being quite granular. That was the only problem that I had. And I ended up having to create sort of aggregations of modules to make it manageable for people. So otherwise, I think there was quite a large system. It was like 100 or so different modules that compose the whole system. But it did work. I don't know. I feel like we're
no,
really far from compilers here.
no, I was just thinking. I tried to start with what to do about modules and separate compilation for simple, and there was only like four other people on, and
Yeah,
now there's like 10
let's
other
come back.
people.
Let's come
Does
back
simple
from
have an
there.
import statement?
No, that was the discussion, or that was a discussion I was trying to have and didn't have. So it was, what do I do about it? And my current theory is when you compile, you give something that indicates the root of your project, which would be current working directory by default, so easy. And then names that are fully qualified will start from the root and look for the name in the directory path that's implied by the fully qualified name. And if you find a struct in a file of the correct name with a struct the matching name, you get it and you can go to town. And then you can make short forms of all of these by just assigning them to a variable with a short form name. So, if I have a my project slash logger slash db slash compression slash whatever, that's a long name. I can make a short name by saying a value, compressor or whatever security is equal to myproj.logger.blah, blah, 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 and then I get the short form.
So if you want to see what I've kind of done, I could share my screen. And
Just a second.
I don't know if it's what you want to copy, but I have like a YAML file.
Well, it's like, here, try now. It's like, what are the ways you do this? So one of my goals here is to say, the imports either don't exist or they're only in the source code directly. There's no side structure that describes the imports.
Oh,
And the imports start from, no, not saying that your approach is bad. I'm saying my approach was given a root of a directory tree, can I say everybody can read anywhere else in the tree if the tree is that piece of the tree is exporting something. If it's not exporting it, you can't get to it.
okay. I have to restart Firefox to share my screen, apparently.
I'm just going to go straight into a vote for class paths. I think the class path thing works so good in
Yeah,
Java
right.
that I'm gonna do that. And then that gives you the ability to also do like you can literally use jars and the whole distribution mechanism that lives around jars.
I was going
And
to not do jars because I wanted to have pre-compilation, but I was
yeah,
going to take the standard Linux Unix elf file.o and throw in the same information that the class file does,
right,
plus the IR and generated code, so you can just link and run if you want to, and enough extra information that's the types that you use from the class files, like the import statement
right. But isn't a jar file just a zip file? And then
of classes. Yes, it's a zip file of
yeah,
classes. Yeah.
So
right.
I
Could
But
be
you
sent.
zip file.o.
yeah, but you can basically make a zip file of .o files exactly.
Right. Well, that's a library. It's an archive. Is exactly. It's just a tar of .os.
Yeah.
So what I did, I've got a link. I just pasted it because I can't share my screen without like restarting my browser and stuff.
Oh, hang on. Well, we'll go talk. I'll get your share going here.
Oh no, it's my browser. I don't want to restart my browser.
Right. I am getting the share going on my browser.
Okay. Yeah.
So here is your paste bin. Is this what you're looking at?
Yep.
Zoom a little bit.
Yes.
So I have like one file that declares like, okay, what are the modules? And the idea is that you can put, you know, uh, basically a source for the module, and you could do something similar. And the idea here is that for
Feels
the
kind
whole
of make
compilation, sorry.
Said this feels kind of make-filey.
Well, Ninja, Basil, whoever, there's a bunch of make-like listings, but go for it. Sorry.
So the idea here is kind of like you list out your modules and then you say, okay, here's the source for this module, and then there's just an import statement in each like module is going to import, foolib. It's not going to import foolib1_0, or like you could have like something like this, a file that is like global to the compilation, and then it basically says, okay, here's where all the modules come from, and then each module just like imports a symbolic name. So that's kind of like how I'm doing it. And the way I'm also doing is like, okay, I want to be able to use different versions on different platforms. Like maybe something isn't supported on Windows unless you upgrade to this version or something.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a version thing. I haven't stared hard at version things yet. There's something to be done there. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull up. Let's see here what I'm doing. I'll throw in a little example out. I think if I can go find the right example, probably good enough. Find the share on the docs. I think we can do this on docs here. Probably go back to here. Then here. Okay, too much stuff, but it's not terrible. Be nice if we get color coding on it though. So here is something I would simple code, and I would just imagine calling it by saying simple of bubble sort dot smp, and then so the compiler name, and then file bubble sort dot smp, and hit enter and go. And in here it says sys dot, and where does sys come from? So he looks up sys in your build path, and he's expecting to find in your output build path, he's expecting to find a sys.o that's been compiled when I compiled sys.simple. And then inside that ELF file, he has a section that's the simple IR, and he would pull it up and find parse array I64, and it gives me back a vector, C++ vector, or a Java array list of N64s. And so here's a print sys that I would print. I don't have any fancier examples that aren't trivially made up lying around right now. But the concept being, I don't have an import up here. I don't have something else. I have the command line. When I launch the compiler, may have to include a path to the class path, what Darrick just said, class path. But it's your .o's, so your libs. So your libs are going to be wherever the libs are. My libs are in directory lib slash whatever lib simple dot lib or whatever you want to call it. Right? There's some path to where you've put your outputs. And then that's read back in on the next compilation to go find previously compiled things. So separate compilation by finding previous .o's. And then if you need the header file, then you go into the .o's you're building and you pull in, and that's your header file. You pull the .o file in and read it.
Aren't header files kind of outdated though? Because they make compilation a little harder.
So, outdated according to who? Your life depends on people who have header files to make a Linux kernel.
Right.
I won't say outdated. I would say that's a strategy that's been in use for a long time.
Right, but it also, I think, is a solution to reducing RAM consumption by the compilers. Because like you got to think about this from like when these things were invented, right? So you got these early C compilers, and
You're trying to justify to me why .h header files are currently a bad idea. That's what I'm
yes,
hearing.
yes,
And I don't need that. I don't need that justification. I don't think anyone who watches this channel needs that justification. That is this is the way the world is. We can change it. There's a better world out there. We all know that. Meanwhile, we're all depending on .h files to write our C programs to run our Linux kernels. Okay, we are. Now, new language? Okay, I didn't pick a .h. Neither did you. Neither did anyone else on this channel. So yes, we can all agree that we don't want .h's, but we want something that has that effect. So the Java version would say, somewhere up here, I'd say import sys. And I'm not doing that because I'm going to say, you put it on the command line for when you run the file, when you compile the file, you'll find sys and then import it and carry on. But Java said you needed an import statement, and he pulled in the pre-digested, pre-cooked .h file as a class file. So there was something there. It was an improvement. It wasn't a textual import. It was an improvement. But if I went to another language, maybe I chose a different way. So you said, I'm going to put them off to the side and have a module description. And plenty of people do that. And there's other reasons for that, because some other tools, like dependency analyses tools and trying to do uploads and downloads and keep the dependencies correct all the time, go off to a side file. JavaScript does that. So, or at least when I'm using it for constructing large projects with, God, what's the crazy name for the JavaScript dependency tools? NPM or whatever. Yeah, they have the descriptions off to the side.
Wouldn't it be nicer for the compiler to generate that dependency file though? Because especially it could also do dead dependency elimination.
Why does it need to generate a file and have it as an artifact? If it can generate it, why not have it just generate it internally and consume it internally every time? Why does it need to lay the file out and leave it lying around?
Yeah, that's what I do. I don't generate any headers.
Well, I think I guess it depends how you do your dependency resolution, and how you get your dependencies. So, for instance, imagine a larger project like TensorFlow, for instance. When you download that, Python downloads about 4 GB of garbage.
NPM. Yeah.
And there's probably a little bit of stuff that's not garbage in there somewhere.
Right.
But like it's so annoying that you're downloading all this stuff, and I know I'm not using any of the CUDA libraries that it's downloading.
But I said there's a difference between it's slow and painful because they chose to include all instead of having some intelligent decision about what's getting downloaded so it's a bad implementation versus the overall design is good or bad. Like,
Yeah.
assuming a
So
better implementation,
yeah.
what can be done
So
here?
so I guess anytime where you're going to produce a static artifact, ultimately it's going to be kind of all encompassing. Um, if the project has some path which uses CUDA, even though I don't have a GPU, here it comes. But
Right.
maybe if the compiler can be really smart, it could.
Well, that would be right. So when does the compiler become the build system?
Yeah,
So Java went down this path of the Java C takes in these files, they have these imports. He runs and looks for those class files. If he can't find the class files, he builds them. So when you Java C some random thing, he will go Java C many other things until the class files are built. And then the second go around, the class files are already there. So he has this make-like behavior already, but he doesn't develop things over the internet. Whereas if you grabbed, I want to say Maven, and there's a number of other of these tools that will do this, and you say build it, they run over the internet when they can't find. I have a dependency list here. It says org.apache.commons. Oh, okay.
yeah,
Let me go download org Apache Commons. Holy shit, that's a giant thing.
yeah. And actually, it's actually the tooling is getting closer, although I haven't seen it be as efficient as it could be in terms of not downloading stuff that you definitely don't need. The Clojure world uses Maven sort of tooling, but they have written their own sort of, they don't use Maven directly. They sort of interface with the APIs. And you can actually, at the REPL, say, I want to add this dependency, and it will go and fetch it for you and download it for you. But then it also adds the dependency to the static like import file for you. So it's like kind of this hybrid, but you could theoretically start up a Clojure program, which is on the JVM, and have it just like gradually download stuff as needed. But
I
I
have,
think what you'd run into there is problems with version resolution,
yeah,
where you you, you might naively download the wrong version, and then you have a problem where some other thing needs an older version and it doesn't work.
right. Yeah, I haven't sorted out when we're looking at versions here. One of the things I have with the just download it is that I frequently do builds while traveling, and I have poor to bad to no internet, and then it just doesn't work, or it goes and asks Maven, "Hey Maven, is this file up to date?" While I'm
Right.
flying over the Atlantic 10, 20 years ago, and the bits per second was bytes per second was the limit of the Wi-Fi at that time.
Yeah.
So
That's just a UI problem. You can have a tool that is the fetcher and the build system
yeah.
and the compiler. And
Well,
it's
I'm just
just that when
saying,
you say go fetch, you get a different behavior than when you say
yes,
go build.
yes, and that's how I normally build with my makes. I have a version target of make that says touch the internet, check all the things for being up to date, download. And then there's a go build, which doesn't touch the internet. So, okay, fine. So I just don't get these by default. I have to go, I've been building them because I haven't gotten them or gotten them by default. The default behavior is it's either very make-like, completely local, or it's always 100% check the internet for dependencies and upload, which is what NPM would do. And, any wrong touch anywhere, and suddenly 3,000 modules come pouring down at 4 GB of crap. And yes,
Yeah. Speaking of wasting massive bandwidth, sorry, this is off topic, but I just want to complain. Uh, I was traveling in Europe. I was trying to use Google Maps to like walk around in town when I
yes,
was in like small town. Using Google Maps navigation to walk like a half an hour, downloaded a gigabyte
yes,
and used up my entire data plan in 1 hour.
yes. I have been to
Yes, you
Europe
have to
enough
download
times
the
to know
city at the
not to do
hotel
that.
before you leave.
Yes.
No, it doesn't matter. I had the maps downloaded. It
What?
just aggressively downloads everything constantly as you're walking.
I have mine set that it does not, but I have to
I
get the
used
map.
to. That doesn't work anymore. I pre-downloaded everything and it still devoured my data.
Really?
And, yeah,
I'll have to go next time I
I had
go, I'll have to
to
go watch. Interesting.
turn on the data, do a search if I want to use Google Maps. As soon as I had done the search, turn off data and use Apple Maps for everything because it wasn't retarded.
Okay, now wait, let's not get into Apple versus Google here.
No, no, just like the Maps
VI,
app, like
Emacs,
any other
VI,
Maps app.
Emacs.
like use OpenStreetMap or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything is better than Google when you're traveling, unless you've got unlimited data, I guess.
I have no idea now. I mean, it's been a few years since I've been to Europe. COVID hit and I haven't gone.
Yeah, last a couple of years ago I went, it wasn't a problem.
Ah,
This time I was so angry when my data plan like got wiped out, and then I bought another one, it got wiped out another hour later. I was like, what is happening?
yep. Interesting. Okay. Oh, you know what I've done in Greece, in Crete, which is where I've been going for a conference. I've got the deal with T-Mobile, which gives me unlimited data in these selected countries.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yeah.
have not been wandering around Europe in a while. So yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I'm going
could
to
be
count
out of
that one
date.
as Darrick as a vote for fetch is different than build.
Yes. Going back to the thing, there needs to be a fetch versus a build. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll accept that as
But again,
some
fetch
limitation
might
clause.
have some buildy like things. So imagine you have import statements as the tops of your files.
Yes.
When
I'm
I
trying
say
not to.
fetch, my fetch can totally look at all the imports and then go download those things and read the
Yeah.
beginnings of those files and say, well, what are their imports? And download those things. And what are their imports? And download those things.
Right, right. It does give you this shorter version of things to go find the imports. Whereas for what I have now, I have to scan the whole file. But actually parsing the whole file on a file which parses with a standard recursive descent is also pretty quick. It's not quite a regex, but it's quick. I could find all the sys dots and lib dots, this and
Right. To me, the question is, do these strings resolve by the end of constant propagation, or are they really runtime strings? A runtime import is just a different thing than a build time import.
yeah, no, I'm intending this to be it's only going to import things that are constant at the end of the constant propagation phase. Yes.
But
There's
you
a
also have to be careful of like class file accesses, right? Because you could have a sys dot something, which is actually like an instance of some, you know, system class that's not the sys import. You called it sys. And if you go naively doing dependency resolutions, you're going to like start resolving things that you didn't even want.
as soon as I have two sys's, there's a complaint raised.
But it doesn't seem like it would necessarily need to be. I mean, you could have that sys in like in a scope.
They're fully qualified names at the time that the dependency gets resolved.
So you're saying that sys is because there's a .o file is an illegal name throughout your entire program?
Yes. Sys has been reserved. That is the one name that gets reserved. I can pick a different name, but a name gets reserved to find libraries. It's like the Java. Import java dot lang, java dot util, java dot blah blah blah. There's a name there that's locked away.
But
Then you
I
get a
couldn't
short
create
version of
a
all these
variable
names.
called Java inside some function. I'm sure I could.
You can't say java dot lang dot or java dot
Well,
util
I
dot.
think
You could though.
No,
I think
it's the JDK import by default.
But I'm saying that I could create like, as a like kind of
If you
stupid
make a
example.
local name, you
You
can
Yeah.
can
hide
shadow.
sys. Yes.
I could create a class called Java with a
Yeah.
property called lang.
Yeah, no.
So firstly,
You
without
can, but it will conflict with the JDK, and then your JDK lookups will fail. It'll get you the correct answer. It just says, I found this, and it precedes the sys or the Java lang, and so you get your version. And therefore,
mm,
you can't have array list. You can't have
That's
system.out.println.
just shadowing. That's not
It's
very different
shadowing.
than
Yeah, it's just
shadowing any other
shadowing.
variable.
Yeah,
but
you can shadow.
there has to be some rules about this.
No,
But
So
if
it's
you're,
the
yeah, what
shadowing
I'm saying is
rules.
if you're
what Derek
shadowing,
is saying, if you have a class.sys and a .o.sys, you declare an error or you shadow it because
Right.
the class
It's
is in scope and it's
So
local too.
language design, I'm still in the
Yeah,
middle, so things
yeah.
are flexible. Having had people jump up and down, I can totally go with shadowing.
Yeah, without an import, I can sense that you are kind of will have to wait much longer because if you say import here, then the parser knows that
It-
you have to parse something else, something different. But if you
yeah,
don't have an import keyword, you have to parse the whole file firstly,
yeah, yeah. It's
and all
not
the definitions have to wait. Yeah.
a
yeah,
dependency resolution mechanism that was done remotely would still find parsing this pretty damn quick and easy.
Mm.
If I
Yeah,
have to go to I ran the constant propagation, then I might as well have the .o file. I do a compile, and the .o file does all the math and spits out the dependencies. As part of what you get out of this in the .o file, you get the dependency list in the .o, not in the source.
Mm.
yeah.
So I've just got a couple of questions. You said before that you've got the import statement at the top of the file. So is that acting
I
like? And then you
don't.
said, and
Java
then you said in
does.
Java, yeah. So
Java does. I don't.
yeah, but the
Maybe
Java
language
one's
makes
just
these choices left and right according to what they want to do.
yeah, but the Java one's just aliasing effectively or bringing it into the scope. It's not actually doing the dependency resolution. So
No,
I'm not.
no, it's more than that. It's more than just aliasing. It sucks in a class file, which is a pre-cooked header. So let's pull
Yeah,
up
but it
some.
does that anyway. I mean, it aliases because you could import
Yes,
java.collections.list or just use in your source code java.sourcecode.list inside, like the
right.
do the
Yeah, yes.
fully qualified name.
Oh, I guess you have to put the
So
star here. Yes. So
yes,
if you don't put the import, then yeah, you're right. It's an aliasing thing. You're correct. No, you're correct. Okay.
cool. So I was just wondering because then you've also got your dependency resolution, which is a very different topic where you're going away and finding everything that's part of essentially that package, which may not necessarily, then you're going to end up with naming collisions on the other side. You've reserved sys, that's all good. You're the language designer. But if I reserve collections and someone else reserves collections, how are you going to distinguish which collections it's you're importing? Because
So
that can't.
I'm going to go to my class files and I'm going to say which Java util array list do I find first? Which collections do I find first?
Mm.
We can argue shadowing or not, and we can argue can only be one or not.
But
Oh
he,
no, so I'm talking about downloading from the server. I've gone off
Yes.
to the server and gone, I've I can't find it locally, so now I've run the
Yes.
update. I'm
Yes.
going off to the npm,
Yes.
but you've got you've got the internal package name. So
Uh,
everyone's got to have a unique
Mm.
file structure across the globe.
that's what happens with npm as well.
No,
if you
because you've
have
got the
a,
package name, which is a separate thing. So under the package name,
You've
you can have
thrown,
the
yeah,
same.
you threw something in
Yeah.
on the package. Okay, so yeah, that's a thing I haven't sorted through other than to think
Okay, cool.
that
Yep.
it's, I'm trying to dodge these and say I have my guy. If I want to put something up in a public repository, then it needs to be a unique name. So you're correct on that one. And that's what people in the Java world say, com.cliffc.org blah blah blah. And they prefix com.cliffc. Whatever to get that unique name across a global repository. If I'm the JDK, I don't do that. The JDK
So,
names are unique within java.util. Within java.util. They have to be unique, but then java.util is different from java.lang, and so on and so forth.
Right. So if I wanted to have sys.maven dot whatever your name is on Maven dot whatever your package is on Maven.
Yeah. The only reason I grabbed sys was I wanted something short that not too many people would mind missing that would indicate I have left the current namespace and I'm grabbing an imported common namespace. So it's not that you can just have a Maven there directly or whatever. I mean, I can imagine here. I'll go edit the source code summary
Right.
here. I
And
say,
shadowing then becomes a feature. If I call a function, but I shadowed sys so that sys.maven is now a null, you can't import anything.
if we go to an external source, then there has to be a globally unique namespace which Maven is responsible for ensuring, and they'll tell you, you can't do Java Lang. That's already been taken.
yeah,
I
if
misspelled Aaron. Sorry.
if you import, if there is a conflict in importing the Dodo definitions, then you should throw an error
Yeah, throw an
because
arrow.
you
Just
don't know.
right. Yeah.
But that's the case only if you are third-party imports from .os. So you have to.
I'm claiming whatever decisions are made here, I can go mimic the .class file from Java and have the exact same problem and the exact same answer.
Yeah.
Now, do I want to do something different? Maybe, but I have the exact same answer that Java does
Mm.
because I'm running the same thing. I'm just putting the data in the .o file along with the generated machine code.
I still think that import keyword is beneficial here, but yeah.
And I'm looking to say, can I dodge having another import? So what
Yeah.
happens when I code Java all the time is I have a giant pile of imports, and they keep coming and going and coming and going. And when I have like the to do as a thing I want to get to eventually, and just throws an exception, it's in a utils dot to do. When I finish out the thing, the to do, IntelliJ yanks the import. Then I add another to do 10 seconds later because I'm just extending, I'm removing and extending the to dos as I work my way through some problem. Then he says, "Oh, I failed because I can't find to do." But then he adds it after about a second. Then I compile again, he works. Then I fix my to do and comment it out. Then he compiles and yanks it. Then next
Mm.
time I uncomment the to do, he fails, says, "You don't have a to do." And then he
But
adds it. It's
but
like, come on, dude, quit fucking messing with it.
how you are doing without an import is just waiting at the end of the file without an
Yeah,
import.
right. At the
So
end of the file,
so
I come up
so
and say,
so
"Oh, I'm
so
missing this
hello.
to do in the utils directory." And they go find
Oh,
it. Oh, it's a
yeah.
.o. It's been baked a long time ago. Yes, it exists. Okay, done.
Yeah. Maybe just what we are missing is a lazy import. It will a behavior that will look for all definitions once the file is parsed.
There's a
Oh,
bunch of other IntelliJ fails on auto import adding where he grabs things from libraries that never existed or I've never used in my entire life and I will never use, but he thinks I have to have it because I use the word node. So does somebody's org Apache DB implementation over there. So I get node crap from imported, but that's me whining about IntelliJ.
mm.
Fine.
C Sharp's global usings statement has cuts down on the number of imports, adding, removing, all that sort of stuff from the projects I've worked on significantly. So that's actually like really, really good feature from C Sharp.
So using is something other than the a namespace aliasing for a short name, because I can namespace alias right now.
Yeah, but you do it globally for your entire project.
Oh, I
So
see.
one,
For your
you
entire
just put it
project.
in, and then in this project, we're using list to mean array list, and that's it. That's what we use. That's where we use it everywhere. And then you don't have, and that gets rid of just about all of the imports because if you look through all of the headers in a project,
Yeah.
they're pretty much exactly the same set of imports anyway.
Yes. Yes. Well, there's certainly a union of them that's not too much larger than the individuals that covers them all. Same is
Yeah, exactly.
almost true for Java. I get a fair number of comings and goings of pieces, parts as I break it out, but they're unimportant in the sense that, oh, it's just another thing in this damn project. I don't know why I wouldn't want the import. So here I just said I'd rather have not have the import at all. And you're saying move it to some global place for things that are global to the project.
If you
Oh,
have
yes,
import
definitely.
if you have import in Java, when the imports are resolved, when the compiler needs them, when the
When
class
the
them.
compiler runs across an import, he carries that mapping. When the name gets used, he runs to the import, then he finds a class file, and he sucks in the class file. If the class file doesn't exist, he recursively goes and runs that class file, that source code, and compiles it to build the class file. So that has this weird effect of you edited something and there is a dependency between A and B that's in the source, or it comes and goes according to how you're typing in the source, then Java C will do a make like thing and say, this depends on that, and I'll build it, or not, according to whatever the editing is. And if you're using another timestamp based tool to track who depends on what, you can't get Java C to tell you that he's going to build 17 things that depend on this guy. And you just have to observe that the .class file is all updated over there. So it's kind of obnoxious for an older build tool to deal with Java C, which is one of the reasons like Gradle and Maven came around was, well, Gradle anyhow came around because Java C was not playing nice with make. Um, yeah, but he goes out to the class file during the parse, I think during the parse even. There might be a step post parse
What about
pre.
dot star? What about dot star? Import dot star, all of the
Yeah,
definitions.
star just means that I'll pick all the names there.
So, but when it will resolve them? As soon as encounter the import statement, or as
No, no,
soon
so
as
I'm saying it's not on the import.
uh,
He gathers them when he sees the import and hangs on.
uh-huh.
During the parse, if he sees sys.parseArray, this guy right here, if he sees this line,
Mhm.
he stops and he goes back to sys. Says, that's one of my imports. Okay,
Mhm.
go find sys.class. Open it
Okay.
up and go find parse array I64 in that class file. So he has to import the class file. That's a pre-digested header file of however you want to call it. It's basically a pre-digested header file. It's been baked down also to bytecodes, which he doesn't do any inline or anything like that, but he has the header. The header has parse array is a function. It takes an argument, which is a string, and it returns me a blah blah blah, and he has your type info for it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I was wondering about the dot stars, because if you
Yeah.
are list dot stars, but it prelude dot star if
Here,
something,
I'm going
and
to scroll.
this is there. That's when it tries to resolve it. When it's
Here
encountered.
you have you. Okay, so you've added it. Somebody has written an import has nothing to do with anything I'm doing.
Hmm.
Um,
I will copy
sys was
the
sys was my top level import that has utilities like array list as a utility, IO
block.
printing and the like. So I don't have a function called import in sys, but I could. That would be class for name by any other name.
Yeah, that could
Right.
be.
I'm trying to compare import where you take a string
Yeah,
versus sys where you have to take a valid token in your language that may or may not well match
it's
file
a
paths and HTTP URLs.
it is a valid token that follows all other valid token rules. Literally, there's nothing special about sys from the parser's point of view at all.
Right.
The
So
only thing
where is the
happens,
mapping from valid tokens to either file paths or URLs?
he has a valid token. He says it's an identifier. It's not defined locally. I need to find it globally. I need to go to my JDK, which is the .o files. It's lib simple.lib or whatever. I'm going to go find in the JDK a thing called sys as an externally defined value. Okay, assuming I find a sys.o somewhere, I'll crack it open and out will pop a structure called the sys structure. It has a bunch of fields. So I say sys.import. I look up the import field. Oh, it's a field in the import in the sys and it happens to carry a function which takes a string. So you've made a function call to the sys.import field and you're going to pass it the string. There's nothing, literally nothing special going on here. The same thing would happen if sys was just named Cliff or Aaron.
So walk
And
me through what happens when I say simple space fetch, assuming I'm in a directory that has a simple code base.
yeah, okay, so then there is a go get things that are not local to me, which I don't have an answer for. This is as far as I got. So the obvious thing I would want to do is I'd say I would go compile, come up with a list of undefined values, and say these things I need to find from your suckin path. It won't be sys.maven, which is highlighted here. It would be somewhere you've described how you're going to go fetch things. And that's a build project, not a compiler thing. And we could argue about it. I'm not
Okay, so you would
intending
say
for it
there's
to do
some
compile.
external system that has the symbol
Yeah, I go to Maven and say
sys.com.cliffc.aa.path.
wget, Maven, HTTP :// maven.com/ and now I throw in what you said here. Okay, I'll put something has to be unique at the Maven level. So there's a com simple, JDK, and now I put in the name that I'm missing. So I'm missing sys, I'm missing crypto something, logging library. I'm missing something that's you wouldn't normally just have. Crypto slash whatever, des 256 something. Okay, and now that production of that line and the fetch of that jar is a thing I claim is not a compiler. It's part of your build, your dependencies. Some people like to make it part of the compiler. I don't know. I'm not. I know that IntelliJ badly wants to do this. And then I have big problems with this approach, both because internet comes and goes, but also because when I build things, I want them to be extremely stable and I can't just randomly pick up a dependency and then tomorrow pick up a different dependency when somebody changes Maven, right? So I need to lock down and have a list of this is what I'm getting. So I usually do that by doing my wgets in my makes right now, I say make go get it, and I actually get by the version number, and it's locked into the make file as this is the list of dependencies. So I do right now have a list of dependencies. I don't haven't thought through how I want this to behave with simple, but I'll probably lean on what other people are doing and not do anything uniquely different here. Like there's nothing going on here that is simple to language and how the link happens locally on your disk drive that needs to be sorted out as to how to go get an interesting lib from Maven. Those are
Right.
kind of separable, and I'm going to just say,
So I totally agree. You should have a lock file that says, I got this symbol, I fetched it from this URL, and the thing that I got had this cryptographic hash.
yeah, that's a different one. That says I got it. I didn't get a different one every time or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
So I totally agree. You should have some lock file that maps the symbol and where you got it to a specific hash, and then you should have some folder on your directory that the files are named with the hashes and just has the contents there, so you can do the resolution.
Well, I
Those
like
hash things only get updated when you do a fetch. But I think that is different from the question of can I learn all the dependencies by just looking at the source code and not having to have a separate dependency file on the side.
yeah, and I claim you can find them by looking at the source code. This is you have to parse the source. You got a .o, but trivially in the .o will be a list of the external dependencies. So you get them straightforwardly.
And I'm saying it would be nice if that resolution could have an arbitrary URL. Because I said something like
The
this
mapping
import
from
this URL.
the mapping from I have them in my .o to I want a trivial URL resolution that's a straightforward thing. It's just what I wrote right there. Somebody somewhere says I walked the .o and I found the missing dependencies by getting a symbol out of the .o file, and then I said wget maven blah 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 boom. Okay.
so. Personally, I think that dependency management needs to be a completely separate phase from compilation. It's because I'm a big fan of like reproducible builds, and dependency management is never reproducible because even if you have a a log file, the website could just delete the version, right?
Yeah.
So if you want builds to be reproducible, then you can't have dependency management as part of your build process. So you need to separate them into two fully distinct phases. And then you have reproducible builds.
That sounds to me like you're renaming the problem to make it go away by just renaming. That doesn't count. If I say build and it includes dependencies, then I have a dependency plus build. And if I say, oh, build minus dependencies, so I've solved the build problem. I didn't solve the dependency problem, so I didn't solve the build plus dependencies.
But what I'm saying is that you have a ability to get a reproducible build from the point where you have downloaded all the dependencies.
Yeah, we were using different terms for the word build. You're using a term that says reproducible build means I can go run a set of things completely local to me and get the same answer out by starting from some source starting point. And that works because I didn't go over the wire and trusted somebody else to give me the same bits from them, and they are not trustworthy because they delete them and they won't give me those bits anymore. So that's separable, I'll agree, but has nothing to do, no one here has said anything other than that. I mean, I do reproducible builds all the time. Make, clean, make, right? It's supposed to do the
Well,
same.
I mean, if you have a dependency that resolves to a URL, that's like non-reproducible by default. Like, I mean,
okay.
Now we have a different
meaning of what dependency means.
You can download it as a part of.
Ding! You can download it. Done. Yeah. That's what you do.
And include a hash and check if the version of the URL compares the hash.
But you're now like you're introducing this thing where you can't like have a local copy because it's going to a URL.
What do you mean? No.
That was I exactly said that. You download the resolution, download the artifact in your local system.
Always these guys cache locally. 100%. Everybody on the planet does cache locally from these remote dependencies.
That's not to say that some systems doesn't really do well with dependency resolution, but that's a separate topic.
Yeah. There's a quality implementation, right? Yes.
It also sounds like it's your choice to use the web address.
Yes.
We just download it. You want a reproducible build?
Yes.
That's because it's put in the source control as well. So we have
Mm.
all of our dependencies
Yeah.
in the source control. There is no reproducible build rollback. Oh, we're now on version 3 of this sub library because it's in our version control. It's got, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what goes on with NPM and a bunch of other people. I actually pretty much a fan of that too. I have some very simple, very old jars that I have in simple that I haven't put into the Git because no, these aren't going to go away. But anything larger and complicated, yeah, yeah, I would capture those and put them in the source code. You betcha. And put them in the source code control.
I mean, there's no
Anytime you're doing
reason why.
anything,
I was going to say there's no reason why on the class path you can't put an HTTP blah 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 and then it goes off to search that whilst you're building or running.
Well, what I'm saying is I think that you shouldn't have any part of your language except URLs. That should be something that a tool that runs separately, and that way, because like with Go, for example, the import path is going to include a URL. But what if I don't want to, fetch anything from the internet?
but that
But the URLs are actually in the source code.
but that doesn't break anything. That doesn't mean you go into the internet. That meant that you have a string in your source code. Okay, you do.
Mm.
Now, what does the compiler do with that string? Does he go over the internet? Why did the compiler go over the internet? Smack it on the wrist, say, don't do that. Go get from your local cache.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't think the compiler, I don't like the way that it mixes the two.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing or agreeing here. I'm just saying that there is a
It's a
clear
trade-off.
distinction between I have a string in the source and I touch the internet. And somebody makes that call, and you could argue quality of implementation, don't be touching the internet unless I tell you to. So I'm not claiming I like this approach, but the approach that comes up here and says sys, I'm highlighting it, sys.import of blah, 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 a URL obvious string. Does that mean it went out to the internet? No. It meant the compiler saw something. What's the compiler do? Yeah. Compiler does what he does. Maybe he goes to find your local cache. Maybe because the way I was thinking about sys and import, this is class for name, and in fact, he's going to run this code. And the default behavior is now known at this time. I'm taking a runtime dynamic string and doing a lookup on it and doing something stupid with it, like reading over the internet and woo, cross scripting vulnerabilities, here I come, or whatever. But if I just said sys dot whatever whatever, sorry, import, if I'm in Java and I said, here, I'll change the Java one. If the Java guy instead said, quote, java.lang.arraylist, right? That's just a string there. Didn't mean go be a URL. Oh, I'll put HTTP in front of it. Still, same thing. It's not necessarily, now there's com.oracle.whatever. That didn't have to go out to touch the internet, but it made an obvious dependency.
But when it will be resolved, it should be resolved during compile time because
Yeah, somewhere in the
you don't want the runtime to download something.
no, at compile time, it has to get resolved. Now, what's the compiler do to resolve it? Well, the obvious thing to do is you go check your cache.
Yeah.
And if you got it in your cache, you walk away. Then the second most obvious thing is you check a timestamp on the internet and the cache or the URL or the SHA, whatever. But then you touch the internet, and I claim I don't like that because I'm flying on a plane over the Atlantic and I don't have internet. So don't do it. So just touch your cache and walk away. So that's a thing. And then, Ryan, I'm going to paraphrase you and you can tell me I got it wrong. I want a reproducible build. This went out over the internet. Oracle's updating array list. I got the wrong array list. I'm screwed. And then the answer for that one is, well, somewhere in the world, I decided I wanted to say, go get these local in my cache and lock them, which is what here Aaron's saying, or the lock file basically insists that the bits don't change. And if I were to had to go refetch the bits, they don't change. And that means the lock file becomes part of my source code because it defines what the semantics of the program are.
Rest needs it
It's
because
entirely up to you.
constantly
You can put
imports.
the
Go
you
ahead,
can
Aaron.
put the cache in your repo or not, depending on whether if you want your repo to be smaller, then git ignore cache, and if you want your repo to be more deterministic, don't.
Yeah. Right. Somebody downloaded your repo. Do they get the JDK at all, however many gigabytes? or you just take it from take the log file, and then it says, geez, you better be JDK version 21 and whatever
Yeah.
that means.
I feel like log files are I don't know, a hack around solving the actual problem, which is like separating the build and the dependency management into two different steps. Like, I feel like that's the better solution than a log file.
As soon as I had them in separate steps, they are separate steps.
Right, but they're closely like tied to the design of the language. Like when you have a lock file, you're saying, okay, this is how you get dependencies. And I'm saying dependency management is not a responsibility of the compiler or the build system. The build system is not a dependency management system.
It's fine. You have a dependency management system. I can't use it because I'm a compiler. I don't know anything about the dependencies, so it means nothing to me. So instead, the dependency management system has to give the compiler something.
Right.
Okay.
You list all
Immediately, the fact that it gave it something meant that part of my overall build process included things from the dependency management system.
but that's not part of the build process. That's just part of
It is
the,
part of the
But
build process.
I,
We're having name problems here. I want you to create. The part of the creation process, don't use the word build because we have a name jargon collision problem here. I want you to create an artifact that I can run, hand out to people. I need to get something from the dependency thing that you call a dependency thing that I usually lump together with build. Let's call it dependency thing from your version. I need to get something out of it. What I got out of it, how I managed and controlled what I got out of it, that's now part of my creation process. And therefore, I want to lock that creation process down to be repeatable in my source code management. So I took something from the dependency, say a lock file, and it listed every single SHA and version number to the nth degree. And that was part of how I created my end artifact. I want to hang on to that because that's crucial to getting the same artifact reproduced.
I would argue that any build system without dependency management system is useless because it constrains you all you have locally. So they're not separate things, are they're separate steps on one.
They're separate steps of the same process, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think everyone's agreeing they are part of the whole process, and everyone needs the whole process. You just
Yeah.
need different points at different things at different times. But what I want to make clear here is out of that dependency management comes an artifact that I need to record of which versions I picked for what things. That's part of my source to build my project. Now,
well, I
whether or
do
not
think
that's
that there's, you can have like a lock file, but that's like, so what I'm thinking here is like the compiler is reproducible, and then you could have more than one different competing dependency manager. There doesn't have to be a connection between.
I need to be able to get from the dependency management some collection of jar files, libc, downloadable things.
You pass just a big folder to your compiler, and then it compiles the whole project. That's what I think you should do, and that should be a reproducible process. How you get that folder to the compiler, that's a different tool.
Okay, so how I get that folder for me is I use the cache as a folder, so I don't actually have to download it every single time. This is a thing is not acceptable. Hey, I'm going to download every single time. No, I got no fucking internet. Plenty of times, or I have bad internet, or whatever. I just don't need to download it every single time. So I have a cache.
Yeah,
That's
I
my
think
directory
that
I hand off to the compiler.
that should be required to download it locally. So in order to be reproducible in the right
Maven
sense.
doesn't want all 8 billion people on the planet downloading every single time either. They just drown.
But this is this is the default behavior. It will download it locally, and if you don't want this, you put a flag that always go to the internet to the last thing.
Yeah, that would be acceptable for me. Here is a flag that says go slow. Okay, and you can set the go slow flag. Sorry, I'm getting wound up and being abusive. That should stop. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So dependency, the build system is one, the dependency management is other. Inside the dependency management, there should be a process, dependency resolution, which concerns the version of files. So it's not a separate thing, I would argue.
I think that so the reason why I think that they should be separate, right? Is
separate steps or separate tools, separate things.
Both separate steps. The best. Well, you could have a tool that runs like your dependency manager system could just launch the compiler. You could have like manager build, and then that could run the build too. Okay. But what I think is like I want the compiler to be I want to be able to take a zip file
Mhm.
and then extract it, and then pass that to the compiler, and that should be a reproducible build. It shouldn't. The compiler shouldn't care anything about the internet. It
That
shouldn't know the internet exists.
that's not any no one has said anything counter to that. This is very much what people want already.
Right.
I do not expect the compiler to go reach out to the internet. Yes.
Mm.
So
But
and
that doesn't change whether or not they're URLs as strings or not in the source code. That has the two are just unrelated.
right, but I do feel like putting URLs in the source code is like it's like saying, okay, this is how you manage your
I
dependencies, which
mean, depends what you put. You can say it depends on the URL package version 123. We've checked some ABC, and then that solves the problem because it's not gonna fetch something else. It's just gonna fail to build if the version has been removed from the URL. So I don't see how the
Mhm.
network is a problem here because if your threat model includes adversary swapping your dependencies, then you already have to take the exact same care of your local file system because the adversary is gonna walk to your server, pull the hard drive, and put another hard drive also with this package you depend on. And that's the same problem. So I don't see that the network is this problem here.
but why not have a separate file for
But where
your
does the file
dependency man?
live? Where does the
Why
file
put this in the
live?
source code?
Where does the file live? If the file lives on your hard drive, then you have the same problem because adversary comes to your hotel when you are checked out, and the secret service that the adversary works for swaps the hard drive and puts another package.
Well,
So
at
you
that
didn't
point they can
solve
run any program.
you
I don't
didn't
think
solve any problem. So to solve that problem, you have to now include some kind of checksum. And if you have included some kind of checksum, then you have also solved the problem for the network. So I claim it's no difference whether it's your local hard drive in your laptop or whether it's a network in another part of the globe, because you have to solve the
Well,
exact
no,
same
okay.
problem.
I feel like there's like a just like an important distinction between those. Like like if you get to the point of like physical security, like the
Yeah.
person can basically do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But if you're at the point of like network security, since everyone is always implicitly trusting the internet, ideally there are things that like stop us from just like doing that. Like we just implicitly download things off the internet. And so like thinking of like it's as if you always left your door open. Like we don't do that with physical security, but we do that with online security all the time.
right.
And so, like, I feel like there's a fair
I know
difference, and also
I
Alex's
like
claim
the
it's
position.
a I
scale at which
claim
you
it's a
attack.
matter of degree. I claim it's a matter of degree that makes it more or less practical, and it makes
Sure,
it
but
more
like
or less
if somebody changed out
expensive.
a package online, like that's not an uncommon or even difficult thing to do for thousands of people right
But
there,
I would say
just
I
by
would
updating a package.
Right, but I would say that even if you want to protect from that, you're gonna have to add some kind of specific version in your dependency. You depend on version 123, and that version has to have checksum ABC. And the moment you have that, you have solved the problem for either local or the global
But
part.
I will
Well,
argue,
if somebody locally came in and just like literally just changed out your hard drive, they could just change out the SHA on it.
Yeah, but then you have to have something like a hardware-specific trusted management module
Well,
that is a part of your CPU and it has hard-coded this not particular
okay.
checksum in the
I,
hardware.
I think we should stop from the physical security because as soon as you go there, many other things are in play. So stick
Hmm.
it with the network. I want to stick to the network only. I'm listening to Matt say add also the SHA and the version, some control. Um, I threw that in the screen there to like feel how it feels, and it gets another kind of dependency that's a little stronger, but I like it in the source. I definitely like it in the source.
well, I'm
but
not
you
I
can,
certainly like it in the repo. Why do you like it in the
you,
source better than in a side file?
Because the
Cliff,
source is closer to the use point.
you
I would
have
throw a
a
comment in
strong,
here that says, don't use version 20 because there it's npm and the camera widget didn't work on this following version of Android and instead caused you to crash. So blah, 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 blah. There was a reason why I hated or love right here, right now, this dependency versus some other default one.
so
Just for
I have some
what it's
thoughts.
worth, there is a package include called Spark that actually allows this. So I just wrote this a link.
Oh, I
Well,
saw the link. Yeah, I was wondering what happened with
So,
the link here.
so the source idea is nice when you've got a small project with just one or two source files, but I could
Why?
imagine being very frustrated by having to update my dependencies
Well,
in hundreds of files.
yeah.
It's always the case in the Java. I just had this discussion 30 minutes ago that I hated the endless import updates that were coming around, and I
Yeah,
wanted to take them from some different place.
yeah.
As soon as I take them from a different place, then I have another file. Okay, I do. But also, I like the notion of locking down a version number and a SHA to go with
Well,
it,
I I
and how
think locking down version numbers is great, right? But I guess it's kind of tangential to the like, do we put those version numbers in a file that runs, separately from the source code? Because the way I'm thinking about it, okay, that tool shouldn't be like in part of the language, right? The compiler should be able to run locally on a folder, and it should not, putting URLs.
we're still confusing things here. The compiler could just not go to the internet.
Right,
So
but then
having
why is
this,
there a URL in your import source code? Why is there import a URL before
I
main?
need the import. I need the URL. I need the URL somewhere along
Right,
with
okay, so that's great.
version
So
SHA.
why let's instead of doing that, let's import java.lang.arraylist, and then we have a separate file that is specific to your dependency manager, like
Right.
dependency
Okay.
manager dot
So why separate
JSON.
file?
Because
It's
then
not
you
a
can
performance.
change
Just to be clear,
dependency
it's not a
managers.
performance problem. Like a grep was blazingly ludicrous fast. There's no performance here. It's all about how you want to deal or conceptualize
Because
or
then you don't have a combination of a dependency manager and a compile. Like if you do it with URLs, you are implicitly saying that, okay, I can only use this one way of doing dependency management. Like, let's say I want to have you know,
this. What you just said is still not true.
it might be overridable, but what I'm saying is like you say, okay, in the file, you say, okay, here's where you get the Java module, here's where you get this module and that module. So you just say import module in the source code, and then if you want to change how you get them, you change that file that's separate. And then you could also just not use a dependency manager. You could also just pass a folder to the compiler, and it would still, grab the
The, the
same
reason
dependencies.
the reason to have the dependency in the source is because that's where I'm using it. And I want to say something about the dependency at the point of use.
You shouldn't. I say not to do that, and the reason why is like there are like I've seen situations where it's like when you're on Windows, you can use this version of GTK, you can't use that version.
Uh,
Putting like
yeah.
all of this stuff needs to be managed at the top level, application level, and putting it in the source code sounds great when you're developing an application, but is a terrible practice whenever you're developing a library, and it should be uniform between both of those. So that's like
Okay. There's a
application.
lot of it should be this, it should be that.
But
I'm not
there's a good reason for
quite
it, though.
clear that there's
There's
a
a very
winner.
solid reason, right? Which is like if I have a library and that library is compatible with, on Windows on these versions, and then it's on Linux on these versions, and there's an experimental branch that introduces this feature. There are like
Yeah.
lots of like cross dependencies that happens
Yeah.
and like
And there's no reason those couldn't be listed in the source directly too.
No, they can't be listed in the source
Well, of
because
course they
then
can.
well, then you have to modify the source when you're an end consumer, right? Because the reality of the situation is when you pull down a library, and I've seen like projects that try to do this stuff, the chances of all the libraries having the correct information is not necessarily the case, especially when you have, let's say that I have, they pick, barlib version 3.9, but I have another library that I want to use that's
Right.
foolib, but it uses a function that was deleted in barlib
I
3.8.
lived that life. I did, Android / Apple applications doing Wi-Fi camera integration across a wide variety
Right,
of shit. And I lived the endless churning npm madness
but you,
of
you need to let
incompatible
the
versions.
application, like the final, whoever is compiling all the modules together needs to decide what versions they are, because they're the only one that has the complete set of information as to which versions
Yes. This
are
has nothing to
compatible.
do with whether the
It has
data.
everything to do with the source code, because if I'm a library or a module and I set the version that I'm importing, I have taken away the responsibility from the final like application
No,
consumer
no, no,
of
no,
all the modules.
no,
Okay.
no, no, no,
So
no,
is
no,
it
no.
fair of me to characterize your opinion as you want it in a separate file because that makes it easier to put in link time overrides to the default behavior?
It's the exact reason. Well, not link time, but like
Yeah, link
if
time.
I can like think of the diamond dependency problem where I have two different libraries that depend on the same library, but there could be like one library. Let's say I have foolib, right, and I have bar and bazlib, and if both of these depend on foo, bar, and baz, right, and one of them says, I want foo 3.9, and the other one's like, I want foo 3.8, number
Right.
one,
Yes.
if you end up with like objects potentially that can't be reused when I pass them between two different modules.
This is correct.
Binary
One of them
layout is
needs
different.
3.8 because it has a particular function. One needs 3.9 because it needs a function that's not available in 3.8.
But what
Just
if
can't have
the
it. You just
situation
can't
is
build
like
this
they
thing.
updated it to 3.9 because it's the newest, but one of them will compile perfectly fine with 3.8 too.
Yeah. So there's no reason you can't have ranges of known acceptable values in your source code dependency list.
But Ryan, Maven will do that. If you declare the artifact you are depending on in the dependency management, it will override to the version that if determines that is compatible. So Maven will do that.
I'm saying that there should be a metadata file if you want to have version information like that. That should be separate from your source code.
Okay, suppose we have this metadata file, but you have to get it by calling a function. The function is instantly quick and immediately hands you the contents of the file. Would that be acceptable?
Wait, what do you mean?
You have to read the file via a function that says, here is the contents of the file.
I mean, I would say that you read this metadata while you're gathering
you call this function and boom, out comes the metadata as a string that I read from a file, just like I catted it from some other file.
Sure.
Okay. So I call that function grep. It exists now. But I can hand you the contents of these imports at speeds far exceeding, your memory bandwidth via a grep-like thing.
If I'm downloading dependencies from other, like let's say that several of the libraries are not my code, right? I don't want someone else's module that says 3.9 is required, and I want to be able to override that.
Sure.
And maybe it will compile, maybe it won't. Sure. And I'll deal with that.
No. You don't want it because it will compile incorrectly. You don't want the wrong. If somebody says don't use 3.9, don't use 3.9, even if it compiles, because you can't trust the output.
Yeah, I think it's, but like you can have a situation, right, where let's say I want to use foolib, and maybe I patch it, right? Maybe I want to use 3.8, but I patch it to fix the problem that they had with 3.8, right? Like I don't want my dependencies controlling what version of libraries I'm using.
That's exactly what they're for. I'm confused. Exactly, dependencies are to control the version of the library you're using.
Right.
As a library writer, or as just hacking a really simple program together, this seems pretty good because I can specify exactly the source. So if I'm writing a library and I know you have to use this particular library, this particular version, because for whatever reason, like I'm going to bake it in, and that's a restriction as the library writer I'm going to place on you as the consumer. You as the consumer, you don't necessarily have to have the full control over what dependencies are going to, because you might, especially if it's a crypto library, I don't want you to slot in some other crypto library underneath me that may not be secure. No, I want to be able to specify exactly you must use this and do not compile otherwise.
That's why I think it's part of the dependency management. We have to put something like this here. That would basically determine if that library is rewritable by a different version or not, or use that exact same library and does it.
In that case,
there's the syntax you can add in here to change.
There's the inverse problem that from what Ben was mentioning as well, which is that it's somebody's over specifying things for no reason. Say you've got a crypto library and you've specified very precisely which version you want, and then a bug is discovered in it, and there's a 0 day and you need to update. But now I'm going to have to convince the library maintainer to give me an update because I can't unless I'm able to override their dependency, I need to be able to.
This all goes to what do you do about picking too strongly which version you want. You might well know that this version 8's too old, I can't use it.
So that goes to the dependency management.
You know,
Yeah, but where the dependency management information is stored is
Yeah,
independent of
yeah.
what the compiler is going to do with whatever. That's a
I
separate
will agree
thing.
with that. So
well,
Yeah.
okay. So
that's in a
here,
separate file. It will just make the source look cleaner without the versions and
Well,
yeah.
that's the question for me. Is it cleaner to have it in a separate file or not? And I'm kind
well,
of not in the separate file place. Ryan clearly is. I think both
I'm
views are fine. They're
A
just
separate file may actually have advantage for this scenario because if you want to have a particular version with particular SHA, like this version 1.2.3, and then you want to upgrade to version 1.2.4, then it's a little bit easier if you have one centralized file when you have specified this 1.2.3, so you can change this number 1.2.3 to 1.2.4 in one place. Not you don't want to go
right.
through all of the import
okay.
statements that live in all of the sources.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and
for
that was
convenience.
right. That
That's
was
a
the
valid reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
C++ism using or whatever. That they're in the source tree, but in a globally shared place. Everyone knows that array list really means version 121.123 or up or whatever, and then you go only have to edit in one place. Like I
So for
certainly
me,
don't like repeating imports at every file, which is a complaint I have with
but
Java.
there's another problem, right? Which is that let's say I have different import tools or like dependency managers. Like maybe
Yeah.
there's one tool that is a fork of another tool. It has different features, different things you can do to like manage. Like having it in the source code kind of implies that there's one correct dependency manager
No,
and
it
one
doesn't.
correct way. Well, it does. It
No, it
implies there's one
doesn't.
correct way of
It applies it in your head,
interpreting
not
it. Okay,
mine.
so if I put something in a URL and it has and SHA equals blah blah blah, what if there's another tool that doesn't understand what that means? What
No,
if there's another tool?
No,
Because
no,
no,
no, no,
no,
no.
no,
I
no.
have put my dependency information here, but the expectation for me is that you'll get it somehow and massage it into whatever dependency tool you want. And I want to make sure it's obvious how to do that. So you
so
do
you're
a
saying that
grep with a little
humans should
regex.
manually grep through the code
No,
and then
I think every dependency manager should understand what version means, what SHA means, and what this means, and
You
what the
you
URL means. And
you
you're on your own.
you're welcome to write that syntax in what the compiler doesn't interpret the syntax. You're welcome to write whatever syntax you want there,
Yeah.
your choice.
okay, but what if you have one module? Okay, so you have
I
let's
want to use
say,
different dependency managers for every module. No, that's not how it works.
but
Yeah,
no
no.
no no,
well,
no, no, what I'm saying is there's
this
a
to me,
third
this is
party
an
library.
interesting debate, but and it is fun to talk about it. But honestly, like if you want my opinion of what you should actually do, you should just rely on the fact that the Maven people have been having these conversations for years.
That's a
They've
good
thought
point.
about all this stuff and it works pretty well. And they have all these enterprise distribution systems and public distribution systems and all sorts of systems, and just basically use Maven and set up a class path system that will you do Maven resolution and you find the files that Maven is downloaded for you. That's what
I will say the opposite. I used Maven at Intercontinental Exchange. We had huge numbers of problems with that. So I have direct experience with having to have used Maven. And the problem with Maven really was that it didn't fit C++ in particular. That was like a big problem where, there are a lot of idiosyncrasies you have in compiled systems languages you didn't have in Java land. And that caused an enormous number of problems for us.
All right, we're running out of time, and I'm getting hungry. Things to do today, so let's wrap it up. Oh, good.
Strong
Okay.
opinions. Strong opinions on
No, yeah, we have a lot of strong, good opinions here. So slow start, strong finish.
Yeah.
Great. I have got my food for thought and what to deal with modules on simple totally filled up. My plate is full.
Yeah. I will say my real advantage for things like just making it an arbitrary string, but then using strings that have meaning, like http:// is it lets you defer namespace management to not you.
Well, you broke up really bad there. I heard defer namespace management to
Defer namespace management to not you. It is
Uh-huh.
really convenient to say, if you would like to have a package name that you own, buy a domain name. Congratulations, you now own that name.
Yeah, okay,
NPM had a
fine.
lot of problems with what to do with abandoned names and what's going on, and there's something clean about just saying.
Yeah.
DNS has
There is
solved
something
name
worrying about.
ownership.
There is something slightly
I
worrying
hope you
about
have $8 a month to $8 a year to spend for the rest of your life to own your name.
the people who buy a domain, put out open source software, get people using it, and then decide that they're bored and they stop paying for the domain. And now you
Left
get
path.
It's fine. A
some
malicious
friendly
person will pick
Russians
it
who
up.
are willing to maintain the project and provide all sorts of wonderful updates.
All right. This is the current
Yeah.
state of the universe. We can be done with this. We know what this is. We're living it.
So I was hoping when you said you were talking about modules that we were going to be talking about mix-ins, but anyway,
Um,
that
that
seems
could
like
be
a
a
topic for
conversation for another day. That sounds like a great conversation for another day.
yeah,
I hadn't gone down that fancy with simple because I wanted to actually implement something
right.
and not contemplate what coulda, woulda, shoulda been.
So
And I actually want to do one quick thing also, which is just mention, put it out there that I'm now looking for something new to do. And if anyone wants to get a hold of me, I created one of those Apple email addresses that I can even put out into the world without
Throw it in.
being spammed forever.
Throw it in the
You
chat.
finished solving AI?
Yeah. And
What's
Cliff
that?
also, maybe.
I'm just going to share my screen here for a second with this email address.
Oh, throw it in the doc or the chat.
Yeah.
Okay,
It'll
I'll
be
do that.
there
Okay,
for
okay,
anyone can get it out of the doc.
okay. Yeah, I'll put it in the doc. Good idea.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good. I'm gonna call it here. I hope to see people next week.
Bye.
Bye bye.
All right.